Welcome to the Gnostic Rebellion. Today we're speaking with Dr. Joshua Pritikin, author of a wonderfully interesting book that deals with a core theme here at the Gnostic Rebellion and the Gnostic book that deals with I'm sorry, and the Gnostic Church of Light. Religion Unburdened by Belief is the name of the book. We'll introduce him in a moment, but you'll find immediately below this video, in the description, you'll find a link for our donation button at uh, PayPal, and this program supports the Gnostic Church of Light. It's an historic building, and we invite you to become part of our historic congregation. We're the first fully owned and operating Gnostic church on the continents of the Americas, and your donations are tax deductible. While you do that, we'll extend this blessing. May wisdom and divine providence increase the unique genius of our congregation and bring us to health, wealth, and increase of days. Okay. Having earned his PhD in psychometrics in quantitative psychology from the University of Virginia, Dr. Joshua Pritikin, during his academic career, contributed to 10 peer reviewed publications and now maintains a practice in White City, Oregon. He runs Estrella Counseling and holds a level 3 certification with the IFS Institute, which perhaps we'll talk about a little bit later. But it is his book, Religion Unburdened by Belief, that brings us here today. Did you ever watch the original Star Trek series?
Parts of it, I can't say that I've watched. And it's been a long time. So
Do you
what
remember
did you
the
have in mind?
evil Captain Kirk when he was beamed down the planet below and there was a storm surge and they brought him up and they brought up two Captain Kirks, the evil Captain Kirk and the good Captain Kirk? The man got split, his
Yeah,
psyche got split in half.
okay,
And by the end of the show, before they could put him back together, the evil part had to realize he was the strength of the good part. And the
yeah,
good part had to realize that he was the information that the evil part needed. He was its own nourishment. And then
sure.
they, he had to undergo the psychological trauma of being put back together in the transporter. Um, but the evil Captain Kirk is a fascinating character because he was, he goes after his yeoman and tries to rape her. He's drinking. The captain was highly controlled, would never be caught drinking on the ship. And this guy was carousing.
Yeah. So if I could jump in here, I'm wondering. So you're noticing that you have this inner dialogue going on much of the time, and you're remarking that like it's important to be aware of that and to get to know your parts, and especially to develop a more harmonious relationship with those parts that would be considered,
Functional.
have like dangerous or evil behaviors, like to make friends with those parts too, and understand their needs and where they developed from. Is am I kind of getting what you're
You,
summarizing correctly?
you couldn't put it in more of a nutshell. It was perfectly
Okay.
reductionist, the right way.
All right. And then what I was going to ask you next is like, um, do you have aspiration to have kind of less mental dialogue, or like reduced activity sometimes, reduced more of the more silence and less discussion up there?
Well, control of the mind is vitally important. Okay, I got to a point in my meditation practice where I could sit for an hour straight with a bowl of water on my head filled to the brim and not spill a single drop. I got rigid control of the body and rigid control of the mind. Am I doing that now? No. But power over the mind is the power to turn it off. And I
Hmm.
have the power to turn it off if I want to. It would be a little bit of an effort right now, but I could turn it off. right?
Okay.
Um,
So do you have an aspiration to make that more effortless, like the ability to
well,
turn
I
it
would
off?
just
It
have to
sounds like
continue
it's
my meditative practice. Um, but other things do it too. My piano does it perfectly,
okay. Yeah, sure.
especially when I
That
move
makes
into
sense.
sophisticated improvisation where, I'm floating.
Hmm.
Reading, and study, writing. Oh, when I write, working on an article now. It's like, oh, the Yankee games are going to keep me from writing it. And I'm just like crying to get this out. And each article is like a sculpture to me.
Yeah.
And so these are other disciplines of the mind, and intense concentration is called dharana. It's the step before samadhi, and it's really the goal most people reach in meditation is dharana, intense concentration, right? Um,
Yeah.
when you get to samadhi, you and the object are one and the same. There, you lose the separation between the two. Um, for me, that really was facilitated by mantra. I worked the mantra, and soon enough I'd go into the mantra, and my timer would ring, ding, and hours passed. Gotta get ready for work.
Yeah.
um, and yet with concentration, when I'm concentrating on a book and I'm really into the subject matter, um, when I am working, my first two experiences of concentration in a Dharana-like sense were a teenager in high school. Um, this one time I brought home the sculpture I was working on in art class. It was very detailed, articulating sculpture. It was really carving out. And it was about this big, but very modern 1960s kind of things sticking. I don't know if you remember the way the backgrounds were created for the artists singing in the 60s talk shows, but it was really, really detailed. And it was due Monday. If I put the entire weekend in it from waking to sleeping, I could get it done. So Saturday morning, I got up, and at 9 o'clock, I was working on that sculpture. And just as I was saying to myself, I think I'll take a break and get some lunch, my mother yelled downstairs, "Good night."
You
I
just
had no
lost track
idea.
of time completely.
Well, time dilution, right? I just
Yeah.
lost it. The same happened practicing my scales and exercises on the piano. Same exact thing. Started at 9 o'clock in the morning, and my mother next yelled downstairs, "Good night."
Yeah.
You know, um, had no idea. And the time, I write my articles today. I work on an article. I get, two paragraphs just about right, working out some ideas, putting them into this. And the next thing you know, 2.5 hours went by. Two paragraphs. Come on, I could write two paragraphs faster than you could take a breath. You know, um, and so these things happen, and you realize that you could consume a lot of time, and yet it feels like a moment. And that level of concentration, well, it certainly has its academic score, depending on how careful you are, I guess. But um, I think it has it's a spiritual connection with what you're producing, and that's meaning. Um, somebody like um, what's his name? The socialist writer Marx. Somebody like Marx would uh, say that. What was I talking about while I was trying to remember Marx's name? What was I just saying?
I think you were giving examples of concentration and losing track of time, and maybe Marx is another example of that.
Um, no, but forget Marx because I lost it. It just entirely fell out of my head. My apologies.
Okay.
It snapped back into my head when I least wanted to. Um, but in time, in the loss of time, we get into that in between space, right?
Yeah.
Good program holds you. I walked out of the first three Star Wars movies with my eyes completely dry, running to a drugstore to go get eye drops. I didn't even blink. Okay. Um, what it captured in my own sense of spirituality and what it was talking to me in a time when this stuff was even more controversial than it is today. I mean, we're talking the end of the 70s here.
Yeah.
And um, Star Trek had been off for a while and we were hurting, but I was just like, Star Wars, come on, give me a fucking break. It was my spirituality professor that talked me into going to see it. And I came out of there and it was like, Luke Skywalker was the man. So much has happened since going through all the six movies, and we talked about some. Ah, um, something about Marx. We were talking about war, and I wanted to bring in this idea of war. I don't know how I was getting from Marx to war, um, but I wanted to talk about this idea that um, what is good, because we're putting the good and the evil together. What is good may not be um, what we think of as good. Um, I'm going to give you a philosophy exercise, and I'll kind of lead you through it. If you were standing in the early 20th century and you had a gun in your hand and you recognized the 8-year-old Hitler walking into the room, would you shoot him?
Well, no, because that's like one of the um, questions that I address in my book is I take the position that killing is wrong, like regardless of
Well,
what
let's
the
take the
outcome
more
is.
well, okay, no, we'll let that answer be. Following it down that line, then you've now set up, and you can be held responsible for the Jewish problem and what they did with it, the
Well, I'm not
Holocaust.
sure. I'm not sure if I accept that
Well,
responsibility,
because you
but
knew that was Hitler, you could have stopped it.
yeah, but so are you saying that I knew the whole future of
No, no,
what
I'm
would
playing you.
happen?
I'm playing you, okay?
Yeah,
Because
because like in
with
the
the other
moment you
answer, I
never
would have
know
went
what the
this way. With the other answer, I would have went this way. Well, you prevented the Holocaust, but look at the mess you made out of the Middle East.
Yeah, right. So like you never know what the outcome of those actions are going to be.
Yes.
Like um the thought experiment is not realistic in that way. Like that.
Well, in the Bhagavad Gita, that's the very thought experience, not experiment, but that's given to Arjuna by Krishna. Krishna is like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
fight
yeah.
this war. My family's on the other side. It would be fratricide and blah, 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 right? And Arjuna's Krishna says to him, he says, "This is your responsibility. You've got to do your responsibility. You don't
Right.
have to reap the karmic rewards, but you got to do your responsibility." So it's all about responsibility to Krishna. But I say this, without war, we wouldn't have had great levels of progress, nuclear medicine, all sorts of things.
Yeah,
War
I mean,
is the continuum of the husband and wife fighting at each other at a larger scale, of the two friends getting angry with each other and never speaking again, of the brother and sister forever fighting. Um, and it does us good. It does us horror too. The other side of it is if everybody had this beautifully perfect, wonderful life, they would be the laziest sons of bitches and the most spoiled brats you could ever figure out, and we'd have accomplished nothing and the world would have died. We
well,
need the mixture of war and peace. We need the
I don't.
mixture of good and bad. We need the mixture of hot and cold, winter and summer. We need all of these things.
Okay, well,
So I would argue, and
yeah,
again, not expecting you to agree with me, but I would argue that
yeah, I don't agree with your position here, but I mean, you're the way you're posing it is that like um, like who am I to imagine a different way of that history could have unfolded? That however history unfolds is for the best. Like I don't know about that. Like to me, like the way that you can influence history is by um, finding a way to help people develop more empathy and compassion for each other, and then by uh, fostering
But that's
empathy
your
and compassion,
passion.
then
Should that be everybody's passion? We're back to
uh,
religious morality and the spirit leaving the temple.
well, I didn't
Is
say
that
anything
your
about religion.
passion, or should,
Hold
or
on.
because religion will tell you everybody's got to do this. Everybody should be nice. Everybody should help everybody. Don't pray for yourself. Pray for everyone else, and they'll pray for you.
I mean, you can only do you can only control your own behavior ultimately, but
Yes.
uh, yeah,
And I
you
don't
could advise.
expect people to be nice. Okay. I know people that are incorrigible, and I got to work with some of them. And I got to
Yeah,
say good morning to them too. And I
but
recognize what they
you
are.
can
They're idiot creeps.
okay, but you can control your own reaction to them. You can have
Yes.
more or less empathy or more or less compassion for them, and to
Yes.
me, like that's
And I
the
can still
fulcrum
call
that
them
we
an
can control.
asshole when I need to call them an asshole and tell them to go fuck themselves. Right?
Yeah, of
In the
course.
same way that I can spank a child and still love the child.
Well, I wouldn't advise that, but
Yeah, I grew up in the old world. The new world, I think one thing that my generation is the last of is people that can actually handle themselves because, we didn't get to play T-ball. You went home a loser if you lost. And you had to encounter that and experience it and learn to rise above it, learn to integrate it and take it on. Most people don't experience their first loss until the job interviewer tells them, we're not going to hire you
well,
in
yeah, I
today's.
mean
That's really,
culture, our experiences, born at different times and growing up at different times. That there are differences. I agree.
yeah. And I'm not saying that my generation's way is better, but I don't think I'm wrong either to have a certain healthy disrespect for that. I think, I watch these kids walking around with their cell phones and they go to parties and remember I was a school teacher for 10 years. Um they walk around with their cell phones and they go to parties and they all bring their cell phone and they text each other while they're at the party. We played pin the tail and the donkey, and sometimes Johnny pinched Susie and she ran upstairs crying. You know,
Yeah,
and that universe is gone. That universe is gone when my mother would say, just make sure you're home in time for dinner. And I ran 10 blocks in one direction. Hell, a whole mob of us played hide and seek 10 blocks deep and 3 blocks wide.
yeah,
Um, and now they're all on their cell phones and they got to go somewhere and mom will drop them off and pick them up. Helicopter parenting. And these kids, everything. I had one set of kids in a high school organize a petition against me because I didn't answer a question on whether I had any respect for trans people, and she was trans. But it wasn't
mm,
my job to give her my opinion. I think it's stupid. Um, but I had to recognize her as a boy, and she yelled at me because I called her by her girl name on the attendance record. I'm a
mm.
substitute. I don't know anybody in the fucking class. Um, and I walked out when Josh told me that's really a girl. I said, that's a girl. And I let my guard down for a second. It was shocking. Um, but, you know, so now, and I've always considered myself a Kennedy liberal. Now, if, uh, you know, I can't stand the idea of being pro trans, being pro body mutilation as a way to fix something that wasn't much a disease before, but now is somehow not a disease, but enough of a disease to operate on, destroying and telling children. This girl was allowed to come into school and be a boy. That shouldn't have happened. Okay. I know schools where the trans kids don't have to tell their parents. They can come in school and change their clothes and tape up their bodies if necessary. Um, this world I don't buy. You know, I'm all LGBT. I've had so many wonderful people in my life that are that way. Get rid of T. IAP and plus are meaningless. You know what I'm saying? They just don't belong in our consideration. And for that matter, if you walk in and you look like a boy and you put a name on your resume that says you're a boy, and I decide that I like you for the job, I'm going to hire you. But as soon as you turn around and start telling everybody how you're trans and you're going to start, accusing people of having transphobia and trying to get them fired, I'm going to fire you. You know,
Okay, well, yeah, this feels like way off topic, so I don't want
it's
to.
political at this point. But,
Yeah.
it's interesting because here's a reinforcement of a neuroses. And whether they feel that they're curing that neuroses through a surgical means or through some sort of pampering, um, it's still setting up an echo chamber, and they're not getting exposed to their real selves, because if you were born in the body of one of the two sexes that you would have been born into, the only thing that you took in our paradigm is the gender roles, and they've been changing so consistently that you're not getting confined, young girl or young boy, to anything. Young girl, you can become a doctor, and young boy, you can become a house husband. It doesn't matter. And if you want to marry somebody of the same sex, or as far as I'm concerned, if you want to marry three of them, you know, feel free. Um,
Hmm.
but when you start getting medical doctors to realize that they can develop patients by creating a lifetime of feed on a pharmaceutical and on amazingly expensive surgery that you can pull out of an insurance company. um, Sorry, that was once in the medical book as a neurosis, and it still is. And they're just saying everything in every way not to say it's a neurosis, but we got to treat them or
Hmm.
they're going to kill themselves.
Yeah, it's that is a live issue in culture today. I don't know what to say about it. It feels like we're still pretty far off topic here.
Well, let's put it this way, because I could bring anything back to it. So if you'll forgive me, I mean, cultures in Africa, Ubangi that would extend their lips out, and I think they were also responsible for very elongated ears.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
yeah, right.
and so they were distorting their bodies, to the point of inability to act. Walking around with long lips, you just gotta, you need some bracing. Hanging ears means you got to work delicate jobs, I think. But
Yeah. Or like in China, right? They were breaking women's feet with like tiny shoes.
yeah, another
Yeah,
thing, and high heels in general. The British women, pulling their chests in so tight,
yeah,
and the girdle that women wore was destroying their health. You know,
yeah.
um, so we've done a lot of weird things for fashion, but genital mutilation. Well, we got the Hebrews with their breasts, and we
Yeah.
got the Muslims with their whatever you call it, clitorectomy. Um, and so we have these very terse traditions, and neither of them being healthy in any way inside of either culture. Yeah, it's done more healthily in a hospital today and done even on Christians today, routinely. Um, but every child up until the surgery could be afforded for, as a teenager, I wouldn't say every, but almost every, comes to doubt their sexuality. they're not appreciated by the other sex. They don't have the tools and equipment that they should have for the other sex. All these things that are just the. So when you grab a kid at that age and start to
Yeah,
tell them
yeah.
maybe,
No, I agree. Like that. It's like this. I don't remember the technical term, but yeah, I had a hard time adjusting to becoming an adult, and I think lots of people do, and I think that's
oh,
what you're getting
puberty.
at. Yeah, puberty. Yeah.
Called puberty. Okay, and it's we're becoming something else. We're morphing. We're getting acne and hair in weird places, and our farts are beginning to annoy other people. And you know what I'm saying. And you got all those things. If you got a hot date and you're squeezing the zip while she gets into the car, letting the fart out before you shut the door. So I mean, we're in this bizarre place. Um, and we look funny. Come on, we look at our teenage pictures. We look funny. Let's face it. As you begin refining yourself into your adulthood, you begin to look at even some of that as almost laughable. You're not really embarrassed over the things you were embarrassed at before. Um, you're not upset that they saw mom and dad dropping you off, at the show. You got a ride from someone. Um, and that whole different perspective now is a chance for you to begin to discover the body, in your 20s. That's when most people become majorly sexually active. And you begin to discover more and more of your body and figure out what it's about. And you may have, even as a teenager, began to figure out that you were gay or bi. Um, and that's all great stuff. But you had to be told that you were of the wrong sex. And you had to be told that very early in your childhood. Not necessarily because somebody was telling you specifically, but because you're reading that in the kids' literature now. Jamie was trans, and he went to Susie's house the other day to play, and he noticed that she was different, that she seemed to be more comfortable in her femininity than James was. And they're
Well,
doing that.
okay, I know you keep coming back to this. Like I haven't written a book on trans people, so I I don't know. Like I
Well,
don't
well,
feel
now we're
confident to
talking about
discuss
the
this.
nature of we're talking about the nature of soul and the nature of belief and reinforcing certain beliefs, maybe inducing them first. So, what would you say if you encountered I don't want to say if you encountered a patient, but what would you say um if you encountered a patient, I can't think of it any other way, who revealed to you that through previous psychotherapy, and they've come to you and they've been convinced that, they're were born in the wrong body. But they're not coming to you as a psychologist. Here's where I want to formulate it. They're coming to you as a spiritual advisor. You're now the me in the church. Okay, and they're coming to you, the Gnostic spiritual advisor, and they say, I've been led now for years to believe I've been born in the wrong body. And
Hmm.
you're still a psychotherapist, but you're not treating them as a patient. You're advising them as a cleric.
Well, but how do they feel about it? Like, are they at peace with that decision? Do they feel like something has to change? Like, where are they at with it?
Good.
Because, like,
Good. I like that as a first question. What about uh, prior research? What other questions might you ask in prior research?
I mean,
You're
like
14 years
nowadays,
old. When do you come across the idea that you could be trans?
I mean, nowadays, kids are can search Google or talk to AI chatbots or, I mean, and they can find out that way. I don't know. I'm not sure what you're getting at.
Well, you can find out about trans, okay? But you can't find out that you are trans through that, unless maybe you're with an AI chat robot who's without parental control. Um, So you can find out that some people, are trans, and you can do what a lot of, just like we did with transvestites when we were kids. You know what I'm saying? We just laughed at what they did. Oh, look at that! He's wearing a wig. I can see his underwear. Um, And more than likely, they will go there because, a lot of times they're pre-sexual. We'll talk 8 and 10 and 12. 12 start to become sexual, but they're not necessarily aware of it. So they're not necessarily feeling it yet, because of their lack of awareness, you know. And, eventually that develops. But now, as that's developing, some psychologist walked up to this kid, maybe at school, maybe in serious therapy, and said to them, "Well, the book says you're trans, the one you've been reading in kindergarten, in second grade, and it
Yeah,
seems
but
like you
that's
fit this model."
your hypothetical psychologist is um, like giving advice in
Is
a
an
way that
is a generalization of an actual case, and more than
no,
one.
I believe that. I know that there are people out there that make these kind of give these kind of advices, but like that's not the kind of talk
But
therapy
as
that
their
I practice.
spiritual advisor, how would you analyze their soul?
Well, like I always come back to what is who when I'm talking to you, like what do you want? Like how do you
But that's
um
you being the therapist.
well, right. But like so what's the diff how do you see how's a therapist and a spiritual advisor different in your mind?
A spiritual advisor, well, I'll say a spiritual advisor is an ill-informed spiritual a psychologist, unless they've got a degree in psychology. You know what I'm saying? They've studied and trained properly. Um, but a spiritual advisor would know inherently that um, the mitochondrial fraction of every cell in their body made them a boy from the point of the first split of those two cells.
Well,
And
I'm
I
not
would say
sure
to
that
myself as a spiritual advisor,
uh
you made yourself a boy. Are you telling me now you made a major mistake at the moment of gestation or the moment after when it split into two?
okay, but hold on, Paul. It may be the case that you're like the terminology is shifting under you. So like in the same way that we were talking about religion and spirituality and different ways that people understand those two words. It may be the case that some people that they're trans, like they're not disputing their genetic makeup, like they understand they have two X chromosomes or an X and Y chromosome, whatever it is. But they may be understanding the these words male and female in a different way than we do.
But that's a gender role.
Yeah, I mean,
That's all they're doing.
I
In understanding male and
maybe,
female,
yeah,
you know, I mean, only boys can play football. So that's the gender role. So
right.
maybe that girl's going to come into it and say, I want to defy this gender role. I'm going to try out for the team. Just like now women are becoming umpires on the baseball field. Um, Women have already entered the locker rooms. So more and more the gender roles are being redefined and they're changing. And I got no problem with that. I got no problem even with the whole emotional infrastructure that I just got done ragging on for the last half hour. Okay. I got no essential problem with any of that. But a gender role is a gender role. And that's all it is. It's society's imposition. And if you want to have a conversation in our society, should we say that, women can wear pants? Okay, we'll talk about it. We eventually got there, right? They don't know that a couple hundred years earlier we had to decide whether or not men should wear pants. But that's okay. They don't need to remember history, right? Um, we can decide that, boys want to wear makeup. Every generation tries to freak out the previous generation. We dyed our hair into colors and put spikes through our nose, right? And the guys before us wore bell bottoms and fucked everybody, and so whatever it was, that always freaked out your parents, the kids will always find a way, and good for them. I encourage that. I
Yeah.
hope we keep
Yeah.
seeing it. Um, but when they start on a course of um, again, that cage that they start building, the reflection of their own ideas and their own self-importance, exaggerated culturally into them, the
Well,
uh,
so let me pause you there, PJ. Like you're describing um, like a heavily heavily defended psyche or something like that. I mean, so that's like as a talk therapist, like I work with people who are struggling to sort out inner conflicts, and but uh, but I try to make it as self-led for them as possible. Like I want them to unlock the like if suppose they're putting themselves in a cage, well, I want them to unlock the door. Like I can't unlock it for them,
well,
right?
yeah,
So
I
I
mean,
just want it
and,
to
and
be as
I
self-led as
understand the
possible.
therapeutic approach, and
Okay.
if I knew the right psychologist locally, and maybe if my church was a bigger institution, I might, that I trusted, that was on the right path, so to speak, I might say, listen, my best advice, this is a very complicated issue. My best advice to you is to go see here, and I can work out an arrangement. He works on a fee scale, et cetera, and we go through all
Yeah,
that
yeah.
because that would be the only real responsible thing to do. Um, but as a Gnostic, I would immediately recognize a terrible thing going on in that, and I would want to plant the seed of doubt. Remember, the Gnostics were accused of understanding that Lucifer was really the god of light. Lucifer means light, and saying so. They're accused of being pretty evil, and the light of knowledge is something I would take up in this case. I'd say you realize that you chose to be whichever gender you physically are. And is that what's making you think this? And maybe or maybe not. I'll get a yes or a no there. Um, but I would put that seed in their head. I would want to get them to begin to contemplate their soul, starting with their body and taking in a spiritual source. So I would be delighted that they came to me because they're trying to pull in spirit into their body. And I know that only through psychotherapy at that point could they even begin to build a soul that would be worth anything. But I would also know that there's a fight there because somebody's helped them to build a lot of soul up to this point that is delusional and uh, sick, because it's not their soul. It was a bad seed planted. So,
Mm.
lots of talk about seeds in Christianity, right? So it was a seed planted. And if that person is coming in and struggling, that seed planted was a disturbing seed, and there's a disease of the soul, and I'm there to counsel on that disease of the soul, whether I got to send them to a psychotherapist or I can do some sort of Socratic deconstruction, right?
Yeah.
Um, And that would be the only possible role, I think, for a cleric to have anyway.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, I've
Hmm.
not encountered the experience. Nobody's ever come to me like that. I have counseled
Yeah, it's
women before, but only because I have that personality, maybe at one time. Uh, um,
it is a delicate issue. So yes.
it's a very delicate issue, as are things that um, belong to the sexual taboo in our society. And I think as Gnostics, we have to understand that Christianity brings into the paradigm a sexual taboo. It's why we laugh when we have discussions on it at work, right? People have to bring up a joke. Um, and it's why um, we've had such a struggle with um, gay people in our society over centuries, though at one time it was perfectly acceptable. Um, we still don't understand the nature of sexual attraction. We label too much of it as disease, not that it's proper, like pedophilia is clearly not proper, but men routinely married 16-year-old girls, you know what I'm saying? Because their wives often died, in childbirth. You know what I'm saying? And
Mm,
maybe you got three kids now and the wife just died. You pull in the 16-year-old girl. You fuck your own daughter if you had to, if you're out in the wilderness by yourself. And don't think that shit didn't happen just to keep
yeah,
children, right? So we have the social construct on top of taboo, on top of sex drive, and all its complexity all by itself, right?
yeah.
Um, and we don't necessarily know what's right. We know where social mores are. One complaint about psychotherapy is that they try to make you normal, and that's the last thing you got to be, because the normal people are the nuts. You're in the nut house.
Okay, well, um, like that, that's as someone who does talk therapy, like uh, I would protest against that characterization. That seems to be more of a
Well,
caricature, but
let's put it this
um,
way. Let's put it this way. 70, is it 70 or 80% of Americans still believe in angels?